Question number 1. Where can we find coaching for women?
Oh, great question. Yes. So I do have off my website, I do have a LinkedIn article about coaching, like what to look for in a coach, because there are a lot of women who do coaching, but I have some specific suggestions, if you want to know them, of what to look for. And then I've got a list at the bottom of women that I know do coaching that I think are good resources. So it's on my LinkedIn profile. There's also a letter there for pastors if you want to know about how to help the women on your team access coaching, or the standards you should be looking for, in my opinion. You can look at that too.
Great, thank you. Do our pastors always need to take twos? Is there ever a time where pastors can meet with his direct report or meet one-on-one with someone who is a female?
Oh, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I think probably it's the going off-site of church property or like meeting one-on-one in an exclusive place that probably tends to cause concern, or most churches around their professional practices probably wouldn't endorse that. The rule of thumb is you just want to bring things into the light. It's really not about not having one-on-one conversations. It's the context of those things. So if you're like most churches, you probably have windows in all your offices so that there's always kind of like some accountability baked in. Even if no one walks by your window, knowing that someone could has some accountability built into it. But honestly, it's really mostly an awareness thing. It's saying we care enough about this that we're paying money to put windows indoors, and this is a really important value to us. So I certainly hope you have conversations one-on-one. You can't really have leadership conversations without some confidentiality, but it's where and the setting. I do think a lot of leadership happens over text message, or if you guys use Teams or Slack or anything like that. I think all of those pieces just have to have a lot of light. No secret bantering. I mean, we've seen pastors get taken out from their text messages with friends. I think you should be able to text message your coworkers, but you want to know that other people are looking at, or that anyone can pick up your phone. So much of this stuff is our own heart and our own practices, and making sure we're walking the balance between good, healthy practices that aren't discriminatory against other people. And if we have to go to such legalistic extremes that you feel like you can't be in a room one-on-one with someone of the opposite sex without something going wrong, I would just challenge, there's probably something bigger to be looking at here in your life and in your ministry leadership than what women I shouldn't be in a room of conversation with, right? If you can't handle that moment, then it's hard to be a pastor and not be able to meet one-on-one with people. So it's part of what we do. So those practices are very important. But we do need to relook at the whole thing. And if you guys don't have sort of standards or practices that have been looked at recently, I would say this would definitely be something that would be worth entertaining.
Yeah, good. Okay, also old. Can you expand on what you meant when you said teen girls today are going to be okay, but teen boys are not? How did we get here, and what can we do now to now help our boys step up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you work in student ministries or have a high schooler, you know that almost all leadership roles, at least in the spaces that I've been in, are easily filled by young women, but almost no men are actively stepping into those places. And so what I was trying to expand upon was that as we look at generational curves and generational differences, so I'm a Gen Xer, and I grew up really the first kind of generation of women to go to college, massively to go to college and be fully educated. I remember being the first girl to win the science fair in the eighth grade, and I was on the news because of it. So there were a lot of firsts in my generation, and my generation really hit a lot of these glass ceiling things. So women who went before me were sort of the first to ever even identify issues. I was the first generation to kind of en masse come into them, and it's been harder than it should be for most women of my age to break through into these spaces all over the place, not just the church, but in our culture. And we've raised now Gen Z and Gen Y daughters, and so we've been strong advocates for that. And these girls that are teenagers and young adults now, they've had Girls That Code for 15 years now. There's special female leadership programs everywhere. Leadership has been in schools since their first grade year. If you take COVID out, which is a whole game changer, but all of these things have been brought on by moms my age as our daughters have matured to make sure they didn't run into the same issues that we ran into. The challenge is we didn't take care of our sons in the same way. And so we've kind of flopped the experience for younger generations. So especially in our public school systems, we have a lot of initiatives for women. We don't have a lot of initiatives oriented towards men. In fact, we've seen a lot of those initiatives really get shut down. And so what I see, and this is my sort of like big picture view and what I'm observing and seeing in the early signs of the research, is that we just see a whole bunch of women or a whole bunch of men more disengaged than ever. And that's always been a concern. We see it a lot in the church. It's always been easier to recruit women. Women tend to come to church more. I mentioned that they're the majority. They tend to volunteer more. They tend to donate more. They tend to do everything more except lead. And so what we see with men now is they are also disengaging at that kind of rate, and they're also stepping out of leadership. So it's leaving this vacuum that women are stepping into, but that vacuum being stepped in by only women, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not interested in matriarchy. I don't think that an all women's team is the future or the way it should go. We need both, and so we can't gain one and lose the other.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Okay.
And what can we do? I think we have to go after guys. Sorry, I didn't answer that second part of the question. And so I think initiatives to go after both together. It's not about like now we got to swing the pendulum the other way. It's like let's quit going from one extreme to the other, and let's build great leadership programs where men and women learn leadership together. Let's build great character development where men and women learn character development. Let's do things together and create a different future.
That's great. What's some wisdom you have about giving space to women to make high-level decisions that are appropriate within a complementarian church?
So I think the way I would look at that is that in church spaces, especially in the complementarian world, we really have two kinds of leadership. We have organizational leadership, and we have spiritual leadership or spiritual authority. And usually, for a guy, those things tend to go together. So a guy comes up in leadership, and the more organizational authority he gets, the more spiritual authority he gets. And we don't normally give more spiritual authority without organizational, except in the case of elders. They have a lot of spiritual authority, but no organizational authority generally. That might be different here. But for women, we, in a complementarian setting, can have a lot of organizational authority, but we don't have the same levels of spiritual authority because of male headship. And so I would say with that question, we need to talk about which side we're talking about and if we're putting them together or not. Now, there are many roles that women have both, right? You can be the leader of children's ministry where you have organizational authority and spiritual authority over the children, but not the parents. You might lead in women's ministry where you can have both and have both fully. So it has to have a definition around it and what kind of leadership we're talking about. I really encourage churches, especially in this kind of setting that are trying to encourage women to grow, is to separate those two things out as two different pieces. Part of the reason is I think there are a lot of men who should have organizational authority who should not have spiritual authority. So my first job, I mentioned I ran like the productions on the weekend. We were a very worship-centric ministry, so we had big weekend services. And the AV guy, the guy who ran all this stuff in the back, was a pastor, and I was not, which I didn't care. But he ran the AV. He was a terrible team leader. He did not know how to recruit people. He shepherded no one. But because he was a man, he got put in this category. And so he got full benefits and insurance for his entire family. He got higher retirement matching than I did. He got way more vacation. He got qualified for a sabbatical. He got a housing allowance, which is a huge bump in pay. So I'm leading him. He's leading no one, but because he's on the guy side instead of on the organizational side. So I like to think of it not as the female side and the male side. I think of it as the organizational side and the spiritual authority side. And you got to make sure you're not accidentally putting men into spiritual authority who should not be there. Because you want to discourage a female leader more than anything, have her work for a guy who should not be leading in the role he's leading in. I'm like, I have no problem submitting to people more qualified than me, more talented than me, more authority than me. But you put a guy who can't organize himself out of paper bag or praise songs from worship lyrics, I'm like, that isn't even scripture. I know that. How do you not know that, Mr. New Intern Kid? So making sure you've got the right people in the right category and then talking about these dynamics from that position versus a position of gender.
That's good. All right. What does it practically look like? This is the boundaries question. What does it practically look like for a person with authority to set the boundaries? Can you walk us through what that conversation may look like? Is it a conversation or is it an action? How does a person who has authority set and keep good boundaries with
Yeah.
people that report?
I think all good leadership happens best proactively, and you have proactive things through conversation. Like, we talk about things and imagine and think about things before we do them. That's what basically proactivity is. And so the better your leadership will go is because you have more and more proactive conversations. So especially around things that have potential misunderstandings. So this is one of those. So I just really encourage, I am a stickler for myself and for other people that there is a lot of things you do when you first begin a work or leadership relationship with anybody. Whether you've known them for 20 years, whether you just met them yesterday and got assigned to you. You have a lot of things to articulate before you get started just to make sure you're all on the same page and to prevent awkwardness later. I don't think it's ever a good idea to set a boundary with no conversation. We wouldn't do that with our kids, right? Like, you can mess your kid up when all of a sudden, like, it's no longer okay to, like, sit on your legs at the dining room table. Now you're in trouble for something that you've been doing your whole life, right? It's a conversation that says, hey, now that you're 5, you got to put your butt on the seat. You don't get to sit on your legs because you can reach the table now, right? You have a conversation. And then if they don't do it, you correct things. But when you feel like you get whacked for things, or you're in trouble for things, or you created awkwardness, or somehow you overstepped a boundary that you didn't know was there, that's the responsibility of the leader. And so it's our job to make sure we go ahead of our people and knock down as many boundaries as possible. It should be a joy to serve under us as leaders. I should have very few hiccups, very few speed bumps, no crashes. It's my job as your leader to go ahead of you and knock down anything that can make you stumble. And this is an area where there can be a lot of stumbling. So I better do a lot of conversations and a lot of knocking down to make sure that we get to sail through this really smoothly. And it's an area where Satan would love to cause disruption, and he does. We prevent that when we talk about it ahead of time.
Can you, let's just use a specific example. Can you think of something really specific?
Well,
and
it's a little hard for me because I don't want to give an example that doesn't fit your context. But
let's say you have a boundary around how and when you want to text people or something like that. Let's just use that.
Yes, that's a great one. So, and I think hours that you do work stuff really matter. And so, again, it's about me knowing what I want and the boundary that I want to set. And so I even do this with my staff now. I'm like, hey, we're a virtual organization that I lead. Well, let me put it in church. So when I ran departments in church, hey, just so you know, I'm available to you anytime you get stuck, anytime there is an urgent issue. You can always call me. Please don't text me. Always call me. If it's urgent enough to text me at 11 o'clock at night, it deserves a phone call. Right? And if it doesn't deserve a phone call, it can wait till the next morning. So always, always, always call me. I will always take your call. Outside of that, I text a lot during the day, but send me an email. If you want me to do something or follow up with something, send me an email. If you want me to know something or need me to reply to something urgently, send me a text and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But I don't answer texts during dinner time or after 8 o'clock, or I'm not on email once I go home. Like, I put those kind of boundaries around me. And part of that is just saying, like, this is how I work. And so what we can do with some of the scary sides around boundaries is just make them part of the regular conversation around boundaries. About my day off is Saturday, and so I really don't do any work on Saturday. So again, if you need me, call me. And if it's not worth a phone call, then I'll see you on Sunday morning. So those kind of boundaries. But again, it's conversations. I think even giving freedom to say, like, you can work as much as you want. You can send an email whenever you want. I just won't answer it till I'm back in the office the next day at 8 or whatever.
Okay. All right.
Can I just hit on the one I think everyone's really asking, which is like, can I sit next to you on a bus or something like that? So I would just say these are things you have to figure out for yourself, and just say what it is. And just say, like, hey, I know this can be awkward, right? Because you're a guy and I'm a girl, and I don't want there to be awkwardness for us. So I think of you as a brother. I love you like a brother and a sister should. I love you like a brother and a sister in the kingdom. But I don't ever want us to either feel awkward or have anyone in our family or anyone around us worry that something's happening. And so I just don't ever want you to feel awkward if when it's just you sitting in my office, I sit on the other side of the couch. Or if we're traveling somewhere, that I bring a third person. It's not about you. I'm concerned actually about us being great working together for the next 20 years. I always use 20 years. I don't know why, but like for the next 20, I wanted a long-term vision. And so I'm like, so I want to do these things. If any of them create awkwardness for you, if any of them are things you don't want, or if you feel like you want something more, just tell me. My goal is that you and I love each other and have a really great relationship in ministry together for at least the next 20 years. And I want to do whatever I can to make that happen. That changes it because it invites open dialogue that can come back. And so that even the conversation prevents a lot of awkwardness. And then we tease about it. He's like, can I come sit by you next to the couch because there's more people coming in? Then you have jokes about it and he doesn't, but whatever. So just trying to create space to be able to talk about it the way brothers and sisters should be able to laugh and joke and talk about these things.
Yeah, it's good. We have a lot of churches in our network that are not big churches, and so maybe there's not even like 2 people to bring or whatever, but are there practical adjustments and tweaks to make for like a 10 to 12 person staff team or even smaller? Like,
yeah.
Are there ways that you would navigate some of these things in a smaller context?
Sure. And I would say these are great leadership practices for small teams, even beyond just like protection policies. And I would encourage that when you make decisions about that, you actually make decisions for the bigger leadership culture you're trying to create, not just address the fact that we're afraid someone's going to have an affair. Like when we make decisions based out of fear of potential sin, it's never really the best decision you can make. So I'm going to tell you some best practices for small teams that hit a lot of leadership notes, not just this one. So one is that you choose 1 or 2 days when everybody comes into the office together. It's like required. We are all in the office from 10 to 2, Tuesdays and Thursdays, or from 9 to noon every day, Monday through Thursday, or whatever it is, where like everyone chooses to be in the office at the same time, because your efficiency level goes up significantly when you're all in the space at the same time, and you do create a lot of accountability with all of that. So a lot of churches will be like, we're open from 9 to 4, but everyone's in the office between 10 and 2. So there's an hour on either end where there may be 1 or 2 people, but folks are coming in and out during that time, so it creates some safety. Or we're open all the way till 10 o'clock on Wednesdays, and we all do marathon days on Wednesdays all together, and it's open office days. It's on the off days when you like showed up to make copies and someone else is there and it's just the 2 of you. So that's when the awkwardness sets in, right? So I would just say, just talk about it as a team. Like, we always keep all the blinds up. We'll call someone and just let them know, hey, just wanted to check in and let you know that so-and-so and I are here together. It's bringing the third person in. It's bringing light to the situation. It's sending a text. It's whatever it is. In the old days, we used to always call our own spouse, and then it was like, I keep bothering him at work, so why don't we just call a coworker? So whatever the accountability is that you feel like helps dissuade that, but please don't make it laborious. Please don't be like, please wait outside till I'm done, and then you can have your intern inside the building. I'm like, seriously, I go to churches, and that's sometimes what their practice is, and they're like freezing in their car outside in the snow, and I'm like, huh. So like, be smart about it, but just, again, we want to not have things hidden. Right? So the other thing is to create an office collective where like all the copy machines and all the stuff is like in one big space, so that you don't have like the copy room down the hallway off to the side. Like, it might take a little bit more wiring, but those are the things that allow you to have like this big open office war room where people are in and out, all the doors are open, all the windows are open, anyone can walk in at any time. There's safety in that kind of feel. Even if no one shows up, you know that it could happen at any time.
We have a few more questions, so we might go a little bit over if that's okay with you,
fine.
Katie. But if you have kids downstairs, our childcare workers are only here until noon, so you have like 3 minutes to go and pick them up. So if you could go grab your kids, of course, we're always like, kids are welcome everywhere at City Light all the time. So if you want to have them come and scream and yell and run around
Totally.
while we finish, that's good. But please go get them so that our childcare workers can go home. All right. The next question, what are some good ways to change your self-perception so that you stop believing every time you vote? The question moves and I can't find it. To stop believing lies that keep you tied down to the sticky floor. Yeah. So it's like, I think that you're bringing an awareness that we have these sticky floor things. How do we stop doing that?
How do we renew our mind,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So, well, actually, that's why I wrote my second book, which was specifically for women, about how to find your leadership voice. And I wrote it because I'm a trainer at heart, in 90-day little, like, they're like devotions, but they're not devotionals because they're not really that scriptural, to be honest. So it's like a leadership book with biblical principles, but there's 90 daily readings because to change your mindset, you have to have a little hit every single day. So it takes 21 days to create a habit. It takes 90 days to change a mindset. And so this is something that you have to return to with the Lord over and over and over again. And just like anything that's steeped into our psyche that has kind of been formed for a long time, and it's not based on truth, it takes a lot of work to reshift that back. And so you need to employ a lot of all the resources you would in any other spiritual transformation moment. Quiet time, prayer, asking for people to help you, reading books that help reset it, following the right people on Instagram, disconnecting from the things that reinforce the thing you're trying to change. So you have to really look at what's coming in. You have to get the right people around you giving you feedback, giving you honest evaluations on how you're doing. Find the people that you know you can trust in this room to help you think and see yourself more honestly. I think one of the challenges for women with the sticky floor is it is based on lies, but those lies are oftentimes about ourself and our own performance. And so because we can be so hard on ourselves, I finally just started asking for a rating. It felt very risky, but I'm like, 1 to 10, what'd you think? And I'm like thinking, please say at least 4, please say at least 4. They're like 9.5. I'm like, really? Why? And they're like, because of this. And I'm like, and that, you think that worked? I didn't even think about that. And I could start seeing myself the way other people saw me. Because I only see myself from the inside, right? And even though I don't struggle a lot with like low self-esteem or tons of insecurities, although I'm insecure like every other leader is insecure, I didn't see myself accurately. Like I knew who I aspired to be, but I didn't have a good understanding of who I actually was and what I was offering the team. And so we want to build on our strengths. And so getting feedback from people and knowing what you're actually good at and your real value to the team helps you know your worth. It's not about making up worth that you don't have or trying to be more valuable. It's about understanding what value you're already bringing and getting better and better at that.
Yeah, that's good. How can a woman ask their leadership for more opportunity to lead, i.e., where they can teach and exercise their gifts in new or different areas than they currently are?
Yeah. So we talked earlier, ladies, about knowing your spiritual gifts and then working to develop them. When you identify those, it is important to actually go to your leaders and talk about it and say like, hey, I have a gift of X, Y, and Z. Where are some opportunities for me to exercise that? How can I practice that? How can I get better at that? Who in our church could help me mentor in this combination of gifts or this one gift? I do find that women oftentimes will want to teach even if they don't have a teaching gift. Sorry, ladies. If you don't have the gift, then don't pursue it. But if you have the gift, then ask for the places to go for it. And there are places that women can teach, even in very conservative settings, but you do have to ask for the opportunities. And then I would say maximize them. Ask for them all the way up into the line. Like most churches don't have a problem with a woman giving announcements. I know that doesn't feel like spiritual teaching like you would want to be Beth Moore, but it is a start. If you've never had the microphone and talked to 300 people at a time, that is a really actually incredible place to start. I remember one day, and the other thing is, God will also bring you doors of opportunity if you ask him for it. But you do have to know what doors you want to say yes to. And your leader needs to know. He can't magically know what is on your heart or what you feel like God is calling you to, or even what your gifts are. You're probably a great employee, which means you do what's asked of you even if you hate it, and even if you're not that good at it. Women tend to really overperform on stuff they suck at, to be honest. And so you have to explain to them, to your leaders, this is actually what I think I'm good at. These are actually what my spiritual gifts are. This is actually what I feel like I'm stewarding in the kingdom. What do you have for me? Like, just helping him know will help him look at you differently, will open up doors of opportunity. He'll give you feedback on those things. Now, you can't be faint of heart when you go asking for feedback and opportunities. So just be ready. Like, you got to buck up. You got to put your big girl panties on. You got to take the feedback. You got to take the criticism. You got to ask for opportunities, right? And then you got to say yes when they come. You can't say, oh, gosh, no, not this weekend. We got 7 soccer games. Nope, it doesn't work that way. When you ask for opportunities, you got to figure out how to say yes to them and make the soccer game, right? So if you're going to go for it, you got to go for it. And you got to do the leadership stuff that comes with it. So, but I have a feeling there's a lot more opportunities than you're aware of if you have the direct conversations.
It's good. Okay, what do you think the new Billy Graham rules should be?
I wish I had that answer. I'd write that book and it would sell a lot. In my book, I do have a whole chapter dedicated to this, and it really is one of the reasons I don't think it's easy to have new rules is because every context is so different. And the values of a church, the priorities of a team, the history of a church, just like everything is beneficial, or everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial, right? So there are boundaries I have around my life and my sin tendencies that no one else needs to have. There are places I can go with freedom. There are shows I can watch in freedom. And there are places that I choose never to go again, and shows that have content I will never watch, that are completely fine for another Christian to watch. I have my own boundaries because I have my own temptations. I have my own history. I have my own stumbling. Spiritual bodies have the same thing. And so there is a history here and a history of your environment that play a lot into this. And so the boundaries that you all need are different than the boundaries that other churches need. And so that's part of what gets taken into context. But it's also part of the challenge of sort of figuring out where can we take freedoms that we haven't, right? They're part of like living in grace of Christ is knowing I don't have to live in this legalistic, scared mentality anymore. I actually have more freedom to enjoy life and have fewer restrictions than I ever thought possible. And so in this topic, there are some things that need more protection and some things that need more freedom. And it's up to you as a team to figure out what that is here.
That's good. Question from a guy.
I like how you clarified this one.
I know. Where have you felt your internal bias against women or observed this in others, and help us understand where this shows up? You did a little bit more examples of that in the Q&A with the women this morning of like with that, where did you notice like that internal bias toward women?
So I grew up in an environment and a household that just didn't have women lead very much. So I remember watching the news as like a 2nd or 3rd grader, and we had our first female news anchor in Montana. Just shows you everything you need to know about me. We're the state that just banned TikTok. That tells you everything you need to know about where I grew up. And I remember my mom saying, I just never liked the sound of a woman's voice. And that really stuck in my mind. And so it's one of the reasons why I didn't ever really get up with a microphone till I was well into my 30s. Because I'm like, no one wants to hear a woman's voice, right? Like physically listen to it. And I think and that was like one night with my mom, who's an amazing woman, right? But that was, the reason it probably stuck is because I was a part of a culture where I never saw a woman speak into a microphone. And I had a lot of female teachers, but as any leadership roles in any schools, any of the hard subjects in high school were all taught by men. Like, I look back and I'm like, wow, we were really steeped in a lot of gender bias and gender boxes. And so I carried that in. So even when I was in churches that allowed women to teach, even if she got up and like gave the announcements, I'd be like, oh, that's such a shame that we all have to listen to a female voice. Like, I'm consciously and unconsciously thinking that in my mind. And so it took me a long time to recognize that I have this discrimination against that. And even when I would get up and lead a meeting or lead instructions on something, the whole time I'm like, oh, I should probably give this to someone else, or I'm sure no one really wants to be listening to me right now. And so those things really weigh on you. And so I think those biases come a lot. So any areas where you feel like you haven't seen a lot of women do something are probably going to be areas that you have bias. When it comes to teaching, and I would say there are a lot of complementarian churches that allow women to teach or don't allow women to teach. I'm actually not sure which one you are, but usually with male headship or like a panel opportunity or something like that, there's space for women to be involved in that more. There is a resistance to those spaces because we're just not used to it. And our audience, even me as an audience member, and a woman gets up and does something very benign, I'm used to hearing a man's take on things. I'm used to male metaphors. I'm used to male examples. I'm like, plus I grew up in Montana, so I'm like, give me a hunting analogy any day. I don't want to hear about like how sad you were when you woke up and you spilled milk on yourself. Like, I don't connect to those. Now, that's actually my life. I'm actually the mom who spills milk on herself. But when I'm in a church setting or I'm in a business setting, it was so foreign to me that I had a hard time even connecting in the same way. So it took me a long time to shift my heart. And I remember realizing I was having these judgments against women as they were like making announcements. I'm like, what is my problem that I don't want this person who I'm actually friends with and think the world of and I think is super talented? Why, as soon as she gets up on stage, am I like, And it was my own heart. And so I just had to start committing to anytime I see a woman do something where I get that little like, I'm not sure she's the right person, or I'm not sure she should, or I'm not sure if I want, or I'm not sure if this will work. I just decided to start praying for them. And I'm like, God, if you've called her to do this, then I want this to go well for her. Would you please make her more fruitful in the kingdom? Would you please show me if I'm seeing this incorrectly? And like 99.9 times out of 10, I was seeing it incorrectly. So that's what I say when this really comes down to the individual practices of us as individual leaders. We're the people who are living out the culture. We're the culture carriers of your church, of the kingdom. And so we work from the inside out, right? And so the things that are going on in our heart, even if we think we're not saying it out loud, it is reverberating in the spiritual realm. And I got to take care of those things on the inside of me so that the things that flow out of me are the right stuff.
Okay. Do we have time for one? How are you? Is everybody starving?
One more.
One more.
You get a 15-minute window on things like this.
We're going to do one more. Make it count. How can we help our church leadership make more equitable decisions for women if we, I'm guessing this is a question from women, if we are not the ones making decisions? So the question is, if women aren't the decision makers, how do things become more equitable?
Well, I mean, hopefully moments like this help raise the awareness that whoever is sitting in positions of authority and power are going to look at things differently. So the first thing is there's a lot that we can do for women that really don't require they don't require any particular person to be raising the issue. So you can pull your payroll and pretty easily know if you're paying women equitably for the influence they have. So this is not about role and title, it's about influence, and it's about capacity. So I see in multi-site a lot, when you're in one church in multiple locations, it's really easy to see when you've got a children's director at one campus who's overseeing 300 kids and 25 volunteers, and you have a student pastor at this campus who's got 7 kids showing up, and he's paid more than she is, right? That's unequitable, right? He may be a pastor and she's a director, but you're talking about span of care and influence on a congregation. There's really no, in leadership capacity, there's really no comparison. So there's some pretty easy, concrete things that I'm hoping your HR people and stuff, because, if you don't, then you get sued, if you didn't know that. So you should be looking at those things and making sure that that is happening. But there are, I do think part of it is wherever you're at in the organization to be asking questions. Right? We all get to ask questions. It's different than making demands, but when we ask questions, we raise issues. Most of the pastors that I work with, when I sort of get in and start looking at things or asking questions, most of them are actually quite horrified that this happened. They're like, had no idea we were paying people inequitably. I had no idea that taking my friends to lunch Monday through Thursday was making the women on my team feel like I didn't care about their leadership. I had no idea that the things I thought were protecting and creating a safe environment where women could thrive were actually limiting their ability to grow in leadership. It's mostly what I call loving ignorance, right? It's like great, godly men who love God and want to see the church flourish and are trying their best to do it in the way they were taught. This is me. I was trying to do it in the way that I was taught, in the way that was handed down to me. but those things weren't actually working. And so the people that I overlooked and the interviews that I refused to take and the women that I dismissed, I carry that. And so when we know better, we can do better. So part of our job as the women on the team is to be doing things like this and being advocates and raising the issues. And when you have godly men who care about their flock, in which the majority of them are women, and who care about reaching the mission that God has given them, which is going to require everyone that God has decided to have leadership gifts. We don't decide who gets a leadership gift. I didn't decide to be a leader. God decided that for me. So if he's brought you a leader, it's our job to steward all those gifts. If he brought leadership, that's one of the things we're supposed to steward to reach the mission, to fill up all the frames and more on the wall. So I care about all of that. I want to know those things. What we have to do is get better about talking about them. And so we have to be able to have honest conversations that are honoring to one another, where we listen, we value, and then we make decisions. And sometimes decisions seem like the right one, and sometimes decisions seem like the wrong one. Sometimes decisions wait. Feels a lot like praying to the Lord, like yes, no, wait, right? Those are my options. So that's what leadership and authority does. But we do have to speak up for it. I would say, too, if you're on a leadership team that doesn't have any women on it, please make sure you're asking the female leaders in your spaces and in your circles for their thoughts on things, or bring them in for the discussion. Just because they don't have a role on the team or a certain level doesn't mean you can't access their opinions or make them part of the collaboration to get the best decision. We make better decisions, the research say to us, with the more diversity we have. We make better decisions, they last longer, they're more creative, morale goes up, and attrition goes down when we have diverse perspectives on our team. And, by the way, if you're only asking people in their 30s, you're missing it, right? If you're only asking men, you're missing it. If you're only asking women, you're missing it. If you're running children's ministry and you're only asking moms what they think about your ministry, you're missing it. Actually, the statistic for diversity around opinions and all those research is that you want 40% of your perspectives to not be the majority. So if you're making a decision and the majority of your leadership is, I don't know, white, early 40s, partially bald, like, I'm just making this up. Like, if
She's
that's
been on
your
our
majority,
website.
if that's your majority, you want to get 40% more people to join in the conversation to have a really well-grounded decision. You don't need 50% women, 50% old people, 50% under 20. Like, you don't need that. You just need 40% to not be like everybody else, to not fall into groupthink. That's how you get the best decision. And really, in the church, we're like the one organization that's supposed to reach everybody. We don't really have a target audience. Your target audience is 10 miles, right? You got everybody here. So we, more than anybody, need to make sure we've got all those different kinds of perspectives so we make the best decisions to reach the people that God has called us to in our local churches.
Amen. Can we give Katie a hand?
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for coming.